friends and supporters. This is the second episode of our podcast, From the Ground Up. And today I'm going to be interviewing the wonderful Andy Arthur. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
Now, Andy is a very special person in the South Florida theater community. You need to know that Andy Arthur is a playwright, executive director of the South Florida Theater League, artistic director of Lost Girls Theater, and adjunct faculty at the New World School of the Arts. So welcome, Andy.
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming. I wanted to start off talking about the South Florida Theater League. Now, I know you weren't one of the founders of the league, but I was just wondering, how long have you been the executive director?
I've been executive director since 2007, so a long time, 15 years. And the organization I've been about half the time. It's about 30 years old. No, it's 30 years old this year. It was founded in 1993. So, yeah.
Okay, and that's great. So, I know you didn't found it, but I know that you took it over, and I know you made an incredible change to it. So, Can you tell me a little bit about what you've done over the years to help it grow and expand?
Sure. Over the past 15 years, I was the first full-time executive director. We've had part-time. Dolores Miller was the first part-time executive director, and then Erin Dirth was executive director, also part-time, for about 2 years. And then at that time in 2007, they're like, you know what, we really want the board of the organization at the time really was like, I want this organization to grow. And they decided to raise the money to bring on a full-time executive director because there's only so much if you're a tiny organization, only so much you can do. Mm-hmm. I was young. I was relatively out of school at the time. I graduated with a BFA in playwriting from DePaul University. I had moved down here from Chicago where I had been working multiple theater jobs, not quite making ends meet, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I started working at Florida Stage, and from Florida Stage, I went to interview for the Theater League job and accepted the position. In the time at the Theater League, we had a lot fewer programs than we have now. Over my time there, I've done a lot of educational workshops, or I brought in a lot of educational workshops. I haven't personally led them. We have this wonderful anti-racism cohort that we started in 2020 with Christina Alexander and Katie Christie, where it is 6 months of intensive training to for historically white theater companies to unpack their biases and try and figure out ways to bring in more people of color from the ground up, both in audiences and actors and performers, and how do you make a more equitable theater community. We've had 2 rounds of that cohort. We're hoping to launch a third soon. We're going to be doing another cohort for small organizations that want to do longer-based strategitic planning. So many tiny organizations are just like, how do I keep the lights on? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so you can't, if you're always focused on the next crisis, you can't really think long term about things. And so one of the things that I want the Theater League to do to help organizations to think longer term, to think about what is 3 years out, what is 5 years out, particularly since I feel like at the start of the pandemic, when we were all shut down, there was an intense desire to reform what a community could look like. I'm sure you remember those days. Yes, we were all terrified because we weren't performing, we weren't doing, but because we weren't performing, because we weren't doing, we were able to reflect more and just think about, this is national. This isn't just South Florida. The idea of getting rid of 10 out of 12s. Those are, for people that aren't in the theater, those are your tech rehearsals. So right before opening, actors would work 10 out of 12 hours in a day, usually 2 dinner breaks that are an hour out of a 12-hour day. And that's grueling and exhausting, and designers and stagehands would be there much, much longer than 12 hours. That's just the actor schedule. And living this way is unsustainable. I think we all
No,
realize that, yeah, the way
definitely.
we were doing things is unsustainable. So what I really want the Theater League to be doing in the future is helping theaters find long-term models of sustainability. How can we develop audiences in a way that's sustainable? How can we have artistic practices in a way that's sustainable? How can we not be next crisis all the time in a way like moving forward? So yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that living in crisis mode kind of shortens your lifespan.
Yeah, it does. It
Eventually.
100% does, Lori. You're totally right. Like,
I mean, in more ways than one, because already you're living under stress, right?
hmm
And so you're not really enjoying your life to the fullest. And then the second thing is it just has an effect on your health eventually, right?
yeah. And it
Yeah.
also affects your art. If you're stressed all the time, you're not making your best art because you're always like,
Exactly. You've got 10 million things on your plate and you
hmm
can't really focus. Yeah. Well, that sounds great. It sounds really interesting. And it sounds like something I'd be interested in too.
Yeah, look,
So,
you're definitely welcome, particularly for the strategic planning cohorts. So we'll definitely invite FemiScripts to join that. So
well,
yeah.
thank you. So I noticed over the pandemic, you had a lot of workshops online as
hmm
well, and you also, I think you worked on your website,
hmm
and
Yeah, we did a major overhaul of the website. Our web designer is Dewey Davis Thompson. He is also a playwright, so he knows the field very well. He was also the president of the board of Theater Tampa Bay, which is our Tampa equivalent. So like he gets service organization. So it's really fun to work on a website redesign with someone who really understands what's going on, as opposed to just any other web designer is like, yeah, we'll just throw all you need up on a thing. Like it gets at the needs. We do have some quirks with the website, and I will be the first to acknowledge that. Trying to find a membership module where all the our individual members, so we have actors, designers, playwrights who are individual members, and I want them to be able to update their profile information. But finding
mhm.
a way to do that that is within the Theater League's budget is difficult. So like what we have is what we can do right now. So if someone wants to donate lots of money to get something super fancy, we will 100% take it. Like I know there's quirks to it, but it's also like you do what you can with the availability of things you have. Like sometimes to have something that's really, really fancy, that does take amount of capital. And, you know, we're all nonprofits. The Theater League is also a nonprofit, and all of our members are artists and theater companies. So like that's a main source of our income. So we're all trying to make do.
What are some of the other challenges you faced as the director of the league?
I feel like now that we're all back to normal, for lack of a better word, like we're all back in that crisis mode. And so getting everyone together to do some of this stuff that would help them long term is a little harder, just because if you got a fire in your building, you got to put out that fire first before you go learn to stop fires 101. For as a terrible extended metaphor, but like that, I would love to see more collaboration and more talking about things. Audience development's just a real huge thing. I had a conversation with Margaret Ledford and Andy Rogo. Andy is the artistic director of Island City Stage, and Margaret's the artistic director of City Theater, and both of them were talking about how their audiences aren't entirely back.
Mm.
And Andy was saying like political plays aren't doing so well for Island City Stage, whereas Margaret said what the Constitution means for me was really, really a good seller for them. So it's like
Hmm.
figuring out where the different audiences are at and how to serve your community in a way that allows your theater to be sustainable and brings in audiences. And do we just acknowledge that there are some audiences that we lost through COVID that we're not getting back?
Hmm.
People who are immune compromised, people who are older, people who are still cautious of going to the theater. Like there are lots of people who are out and about and like they're just, hey, we're back. And there are other people who are still like, no one's wearing a mask anymore. Nothing feels safe to me. Like I don't want to go out anymore. And so like how do you get those people back when it doesn't feel safe to them, whereas other people are sort of like, I'm done. Pandemic, what happened? That's over, right? So it's figuring out that balance in an audience development way, and maybe it's letting some of those folks who just are going to be scared, giving them streaming options or ways to also see theater that isn't going to keep them at their comfort level, but also spending time reaching out to new audiences that are okay with being in a space with other people, even if the majority of them are unmasked.
And streaming options is not exactly uncomplicated, right?
No, it's not uncomplicated. There's union considerations, there's technology considerations. I would love to talk with Barry Newport of Gable Stage, because I know Gable Stage streams every single show that they're doing.
Yeah,
I've noticed a streaming ticket. Like, that's just something she's planned in, and I'm like, okay, so how did you negotiate that with Equity, or did you negotiate that with SAG? And then it's like, how did you get the technology that you need, and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, during the pandemic, that was our only option. So you'd think we would have been able to learn more about it then. But I mean, it's different when you're just streaming as opposed to being in a theater and streaming. So
right,
it's a whole different ball game. Yeah.
Yeah.
So where do you see the league going in the future?
I think we're going to continue doing sort of professional development for artists and administrators, because I think that's a really good service that we provide. We're going to launch a new marketing initiative probably in April, early April, that I've been talking about for a while. After we get off of this podcast, I'll probably contact people about this, but the idea is that theater companies can band together to market stuff together. So let's say you have a play at FemuScripts that's about lesbians, and Island City Stage is doing a play about lesbians. Then you guys can get together and band together and market your plays together in South Florida Gay News, and the Theater League would pay for a portion of that.
Wow.
So the idea is, I want more theaters, and this is the board I came up with this idea, but the board's on board, but theaters collaboratively marketing their shows. Because we don't live in a vacuum, and how can you market things together?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting concept. Do you know if anyone's doing that anywhere else? Do they?
I know sometimes there's been similar things, like the League of Chicago Theaters once did a theater passport thing. So like they highlighted 4 theaters that highlighted different regions of the world, and they market stuff together. I'm not sure if anyone's doing this particular thing. I know Broward County used to have a cooperative marketing program, but it sort of died at some point. But the idea, I just think, let's talk together. Let's help you market your shows together. We'll pay for some of it. Like, you still have to pay for part of it. It's not, you get free marketing, but it allows us to help you promote your shows better. And
really interesting
collaboration.
Yeah, that would definitely help with audience engagement, I suppose, or outreach anyway. You mentioned that a lot of old people are not coming back, which is odd, because I mean, old people have typically been a staple of theater audiences.
It's rough.
So yeah, it is. And I can understand if you have health conditions, and you're just really nervous about going out in public and getting sick. I can understand that. But on the other hand, you have to keep living.
Yeah. But, I mean, like, my mom has an autoimmune disease, and she just, she doesn't feel comfortable. Like, if she might have come to my reading that I had a couple weeks ago at Theater Lab, she wasn't feeling well enough that day, but she would have definitely been wearing a mask.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's, where people's comfort lie, and I agree you have to keep on living, but everyone has different risk calculus.
That's true. It's true. Yeah.
And mine's weird too. I will own that. Like, I will mask in grocery stores, and I was totally unmasked at that festival. So, I don't know. I don't make good decisions.
I know. Basically, I gave up trying to wear a mask. I mean, because during the pandemic, what they told us was the mask was pretty much for other people, right? Mm-hmm. So that you wouldn't get other people sick. So if I'm the only one wearing a mask, it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess they are useful to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about your theater company, Lost Girls.
So I co-founded Lost Girls Theater with Catherine Siegel a while ago, about a decade ago. And we did this because we wanted to create more theater that was visually interesting. I know that's weird because we've gone into audio drama, but we wanted theater that we didn't see. Like, there's a lot of really good theater down in South Florida, but it's a lot of realism. And we've both done theater in Chicago, and we both love stuff that's like impossible to stage and has like, you know, theater magic and like fun things and just stuff that's not necessarily realism. And so we decided, hey, we like doing this. She's a director, I'm a playwright. Let's found a theater company. Our first full production was in 2016. It was a play of mine called Juliet Among the Changelings, which was a young adult lesbian fairy tale, a retelling of the fairy tale Tamlin, which is a Scottish fairy tale where in the original fairy tale, the girl saves the guy, which I always liked. But I adapted it and they were all women, but so it kind of defeated that a little bit. But, and then she was living in Chicago at the time. She's moved back since the pandemic. We did a co-production of an audio drama podcast with the Incomparable Radio Network, Comparable Podcast Network's Radio Theater. Sorry, I got that mixed up. And that's called Where or When, and it's a time-traveling romance where a young woman, Olivia, is kind of stuck between the 1930s, where she's naturally from, and then she gets in through magic of time travel. She finds herself in 2022. And is like trying to navigate that and sort of like where does she want to be in time? So,
do you think you'll ever try to stage that one, or?
Probably not, because it's like 10 episodes, so it's not just like one small contained thing. It would be an epic. I think altogether that's like 8 hours of screen time. You know, like we did a shorter like taste version that was about an hour. In September. So we did a little like shorter version. Like, this is the highlight reel of the first 5 episodes to try to get people to listen to it. But the full version's just probably too long. It would be a really good limited TV series though, if someone wants to pick it up.
Yeah, sounds like it. So you also do unified auditions with the South Florida Theater League.
Yes, South Florida Theater League's had unified auditions even since before I got there. That was a program that they had with the previous part-time executive directors. And the idea is that theater companies can audition for actors can audition for multiple theater companies at once. And it's a big cattle call. Actors get a 1-minute monologue and up to 16 bars of a song to perform. And they, we just sort of get through as many as we can. We usually see about 100 actors in a day. We had such an overwhelming response. Usually they're on President's Day. It was on President's Day this year. We had such an overwhelming response this year that we're planning on doing a summer version. I just need to figure out what date is going to be good for that. Because our accompanist is Carol Fantel, who's lovely. Music directs along with a lot of things, but it's sort of like finding a day that's good for her and the theater companies is kind of where I'm at right now. So that'll be announced soon, but probably sometime in June or July.
So how many theater companies participated in the last one?
I think about 25 people altogether participated. Or producers. So like we had both theater companies and then we had some people who are just freelance directors, and they're welcome to come too if they know they're having shows coming up. We've had, usually it's about 25 to 30 theater companies. We lost Slow Burn that day because Slow Burn was having their own season auditions, but Slow Burn usually attends, but we had Theater Lab. You guys were there. Peppy Scripts was there. another brand new theater company called LakeHouseRanch.png, because they do absurdist plays and they decided to pick an absurdist name. But we also had a representative from Gable Stage, Barclay Performing Arts, Island City Stage. We didn't City Theater. Next time around, Boca Stage says they want to be there. They weren't able to be there this past time. And also Zoetic Stage says that they want to come this next time around.
Great. So that's really good information for actors who are looking for work out there.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I would really encourage anybody who's involved in theater in South Florida and who has not joined the South Florida Theater League, please join, because there are so many benefits to joining. Apart from the unified auditions and the workshops that are offered, sometimes there's also discounts on the tickets, right?
Yeah, no, theater companies will offer discount on tickets. I know Theater Lab is going to have a pay what you can preview that they're going to start advertising for Theater League members for their upcoming show Refuge, which I am very, very excited about. It's co-written by a friend of mine, Andrew Rosendorf, and I saw the reading of it in 2020 before the pandemic, and I'm really excited about it. It's Play with Music. But that's there. Gable Stage is now offering half-price tickets to Theater League members. I know oftentimes there'll be Slow Burn will usually offer $25 or $30 tickets to Theater League members, so that's a little under half price for them. And so, there's all sorts of discount tickets, and your membership eventually pays for itself if you see enough at a discounted price.
Exactly. So I think it's a really wonderful organization, and I think you should be really proud of the directions you've taken it in.
Thank you so much, Lori. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I really mean it too.
I know, but thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about the Theater League, or anything else you'd like to mention?
If you're joining, we do have a weekly email update that has audition listings that goes out every Wednesday, which is great. There is, we also do classes. I know I talked a lot about classes for organizations, but we do classes for individual artists. We're hoping to bring back Nicole Perry, who is delightful. She's kind of like our resident intimacy choreographer in South Florida. Choreographer, I think I said that correctly, but brain. She does this wonderful workshop on power dynamics in the rehearsal room that we had that did very well in 2021, and we want to bring it back. And just ways you can sort of handle stuff where there are always going to be power dynamics, and Nicole will talk about this better than I can. So, but how do you handle these things as you move forward as an actor if you're feeling uncomfortable about something in any given situation, which I think is great.
That is a really interesting concept. It's a really interesting idea, because we all know that the power dynamics exist, in theater. Yeah. So finding out how to deal with them and how to navigate through them and maybe change them.
Yeah.
To a certain extent would.
Nicole also just joined the board, which I am super, super excited for, because I just think she is such a great leader in our community and is really pushing towards equity and equality, among just sort of dismantling hierarchies. Hierarchies will always exist, but this idea that we have to do things in certain ways, and we could totally do things in ways that are going to be more wholesome and equitable for everyone, which I think is great.
It is. It's wonderful. Yeah, I really admire Nicole's work. She does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to chat about while we're here?
I'm not necessarily thinking of anything. I should be yes, do, but not it's particularly. Okay. I'm sorry, Lori.
It's okay. No, it's all right. I had some questions. All right. So just talk a little bit about how you adjusted during the pandemic, because it's still pretty recent.
The pandemic, I feel, was kind of, while it is a horrible time for the community and just our world at large, and I have so much grief for all the loss that we have sustained. I feel like it was really a period of growth for the league. I think we focused on what we can do well, which is like these sort of anti-racism workshops, these types of cohorts. We raised $25,000 for individual artists through a relief fund. And our relief fund still exists. It's just we're no longer in active pandemic needs. But for example, a Theater League member passed away this past summer, and his family didn't have enough money for his funeral expenses. And so we used some relief funds for that. Like, it's still there. If we have a hurricane, that relief fund will be there to help people out through that. Like, this idea that we can be helpful and giving to the community, I think, was really, really great. And for me personally, it was nice to be able to focus on the things that really matter. Like, it was nice to focus on the needs, like helping meet the community's needs, helping get money for people that needed it, helping getting this anti-racism work off the ground that I had wanted to do for years before the pandemic. But that was finally the moment after sort of the George Floyd protests. That was the moment when people were willing to do the work, which I think is great.
It was really interesting that the pandemic coincided with that huge movement. Like the huge Black Lives Matter movement and the protests and everything. It was so odd running around doing protests in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was a strange feeling.
Protesting. And I mean, not all of them were, but I did a couple of things where I'm like, I'm in my mask. It's really hot. Here's my sign.
I almost got run over in Deerfield Beach at a protest.
Oh, wow.
I was standing in the curb and some crazy person tried to run me down. My husband grabbed me off from, what would be a gutter in other places, but in Florida, it's just below the curb, so he grabbed me out of there because he saw the car coming.
Wow.
I think he saved my life. Anyway, I'm sorry. I think I interrupted you.
No, it's okay. You got a scary protest story. My protest was not nearly that scary. But I think because everything was shut down, we had the capacity to focus on things that we kind of have been ignoring.
Yeah.
And I think that's just the world at large. It was like, oh, right, we have to focus on this stuff. We have nothing else we can do. Let's actually do this work. So I really, that was good. I will also say that not driving in South Florida traffic gave me so much energy. Like, the amount of drained I am from driving in this community is just nuts. Like,
tell me about it. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Just driving down to Miami from Broward is it can be exhausting.
Yeah, it is. And like I had that workshop at a theater lab, and I was driving up to Boca, and I'm in South Miami, and like that is a hike.
Yes, it's definitely a hike. That's like an hour and a half. Or depending on the traffic, it can be even more. But
yeah,
it's
so
a long way.
luckily it was mostly in the hour and a half range. So sometimes it went up to 2 hours. But like, like I have learned that I personally am seeing less theater so that I can be more renewed, to be more present, as opposed to trying to fight the traffic and fight the geography. And like, it's sad because it's less, but I'm more there for what I do see. Like, I'm taking more time for myself, I think, is one of the things I learned from the pandemic, as opposed to being like, I can be at all the places and do all the things. And it's like, that was not sustainable. That was not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
even for very young people, it's really not sustainable.
Yeah.
Because it's just, Okay, well, it's been really nice talking to you, Andy.
Nice talking to you too, Lori. I appreciate you having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. And again, please, if you're not a member of the South Florida Theater League and you love theater, join.
Go to southfloridatheater.org. You can sign up right there. And if the website is weird, you can email me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Andy.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure talking to you.
Lovely talking to you too.